Welcome back, everyone. We've had an amazing day at Unconvention today and have a few more interesting sessions planned ahead. For those of you who have just joined us and could not attend the sessions earlier, the recording of those sessions would be up on the platform soon. Our next masterclass of the day focuses on nuances of working with the public healthcare system, what this means for social entrepreneurs, by Sunita Nadamuni, who is head of digital life care at Dell Technologies, leading an innovation group for digital transformation of public healthcare services. Over to you, Sunita.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Akshita. Hello, everyone. Really happy to be here at Unconvention. And I know it's been an exciting 3 days, and hope you enjoyed this session on the public healthcare system in India. Should be of interest given everything that's been going on with COVID, over the last year. So I'm going to begin. Okay, so my talk is called Nuances of Working with the Public Healthcare System and what this means for interested social entrepreneurs. I am Sunita Nadamani. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a technologist, used to work in the Silicon Valley in the Bay Area for a long time, worked at companies like Sun Microsystems and Silicon Graphics, which interestingly are very much like the Google and Facebook of those days in the 90s. In fact, it's even the same campus. I think Facebook is using the same Sun Microsystems campus. So very exciting days, but my heart was always in the development sector. So we moved back to India, my husband and I, with our young children, to work in the development sector. While I was in the US, I did a lot of work on organizing, talks and raising funds for NGOs in India. And that deepened my interest. And so moved back to India. And then I had quite a long journey in the development sector in India, initially working with Janagraha. And then I was the founder CEO of Arghyam, which is a foundation working on water and sanitation. And then I joined Dell as the head of digital life care, working on healthcare. So I've had a background that's been split between the two, between technology and social impact, and now it's technology for social impact. So I'm hoping that this, for those who are interested in using technology for social impact, this should be providing some insights and some, hopefully, tips for you. About Dell, it's the essential infrastructure company of in one of the largest companies in the world, helping customers across the world on their digital transformation journey, and very strong culture of diversity, innovation, integrity, and social impact. You can see all the accolades here. The reason that's interesting is that what I'm trying to do at Dell is a social impact initiative. And Dell has started something called the Progress Made Real, which is basically our way of tackling society's biggest challenges over the next 10 years and coming up with a set of moonshot goals where we are putting out a call to action for our partners, our customers, our teams to come together to achieve something really, really challenging and important for society, right? And this is a part of our corporate social responsibility. And one of those pillars is transforming lives, which is where the work that I'm doing is relevant. And this is basically to set the context that, at Dell, the work that we're doing is a very critical flagship CSR initiative where I have a dedicated team that's working only on this improving public healthcare system through technology. right? And this is, I've been in the industry for a long time, and this is probably one of the few companies where this kind of, investment in societal impact is happening through technology, right? So our team is called Digital Life Care. And let me now, before I jump into our project, let me set a little bit of context on the basic healthcare system in India, right? So if you look at this woman in the middle, let's say her name is Meena, uh, millions of women like Meena face some fairly basic barriers to their primary health care, just the basic needs that they have, right? And they fall into the buckets of accessibility, affordability, availability, and awareness, right? And this is frankly not just common to India. This is a pretty, it's a problem that's common to emerging economies around the world, and frankly even developed economies where you have people who are marginalized have these same four challenges. Accessibility in, in terms of how much do they need to travel, how easy is it for them to get access to a healthcare facility. Affordability in terms of how much do they need to spend out of their pocket to meet the basic healthcare needs of their family. Availability, what is the level of, care providers, access, availability of care providers across the health facilities in the country. And awareness, this is a tricky one. These are fairly obvious, I guess, right? Accessibility, affordability, and availability. But awareness is basically, in terms of health, how strong is the health seeking behavior? How likely is this woman here on the screen, how likely is she to proactively reach out for healthcare to address, if she, for preventive healthcare, for any issue that she has, how likely, how aware is she of the importance of reaching out for healthcare, right? And that unfortunately is extremely low. So these are the big challenges that, from the end citizen point of view, the big challenges to healthcare, right? On top of that, India is going through something called an epidemiological transition. Again, this is not just India, this is happening around the world. And basically, this fancy word, all that means that what used to be the big disease burden in the country earlier, which was communicable diseases, maternal child health, people, children dying of diarrhea, people dying of, leprosy, TB, malaria. There's been a shift in the last 2 decades. It's gone, if you can see this, right? Non-communicable diseases were about 30%, and now they've become the front runner, and now it's 55% of the total disability affected lives, right? You know how much they impact both in terms of mortality and in terms of disability. NCDs are the unfortunately the highest disease burden. So this is the transition that the country has gone through, from communicable diseases to non-communicable diseases. Why does this matter? Why is this important? It's important because of the characteristics of NCDs that make it extremely difficult to manage. They're very different from communicable diseases. I'll give you a little bit of context, right? First of all, 63 million people fall into medical poverty every year, right? Which means that a family that was above the poverty line has now become poor because of medical incidents in the family, right? 1 in 5 people suffers from an NCD. 61% of the deaths are from NCDs. And there's going to be a 4.5 trillion loss to the economy by 2030 because of NCDs, right? And I think that is a global number. But again, going back to why NCDs are important and difficult to manage, they're silent, right? You don't know that you're going to have hypertension, that you have hypertension or diabetes. 50% of the breast cancer cases in India are caught in the third or fourth stage. And by the time the health, you catch it in that late stage, the outcomes are not very, very good, right? So that's a key problem. Same thing with hypertension or diabetes. You don't know that you have it until it's in fairly advanced stages. Second, they're chronic. Unlike most other conditions where you take medications and then you're treated, you go through a period of treatment and then you're done, right? In malaria or even COVID, you take the vaccines and hopefully you're done. You can't do that for NCDs. You have to manage it for life. And unfortunately, only 20% of the hypertensives in India today have their BP under control. And what that means is 80% of them are at risk for a much more adverse condition for complications because their BP isn't under control. And this third is not very intuitive. NCDs disproportionately impact the poor. And this is to do with the combination of, underdeveloped organ systems due to low birth weight and due to a combination of low awareness and lifestyle choices and nutrition. So a lot of these makes it, unfortunately, the poor are more impacted from NCDs. So obviously, since this is such a big thing worldwide, and the government of India has a fairly, very ambitious and one of the more progressive programs in the world today, which is the population-based screening and management of non-communicable diseases. And for the exact same characteristics that I already talked about, the goal is to catch these NCDs preventively. So you preventively screen people for these NCDs. And if you find it, you aggressively start treating them so that it doesn't become a serious thing, right? And all of this falls under Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Centers. Ayushman Bharat is one of the flagship health programs of the country. So under that, there is these health and wellness centers program where, 150,000 health and wellness centers are set up across the country. And one of the key programs under those is the NCD, population-based screening and management. It's very progressive and ambitious because it's universal. They're saying we're not just going to tackle people at risk. Every individual over the age of 30, in a population of 1.3 billion people, that would be, maybe 400, 500 million people. Every individual over the age of 30 should be screened and should be then, if suspected, referred, diagnosed, treated for NCDs, right? This is the vision of the program. And the 5 NCDs are hypertension, diabetes, oral, breast, and cervical cancers, right? And this entire program is delivered through the government health system. So it's completely free for the entire population. And what is the government health system? It starts at the village level and goes up to the tertiary care level. So if you see this colored pyramid out here, there are health workers, almost 1 million of them at the village level. You have trained paramedical health workers at the subcenter level, and then you have doctors at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. And this entire thing with these health facilities, you can see some of the pictures on the side, all of this with the drug inventory system and the government administrative staff together comprises the health system of the country, right? But it has challenges like, not enough staff, a lot of paperwork, awareness is low, so they don't proactively follow up. So all of these challenges exist in the health system. So when we started looking at this, we said, what does digital transformation do to a sector like this, right? And so we looked at India's 10-year digital transformation journey. And all of you would be very familiar. These are household names. The Aadhaar revolution, the Aadhaar program, where, today you have 1.2 billion people enrolled, 40 million daily KYC transactions. You have UPI, which has, all our payments, Phone Pay, Google Pay, all of that happens because of UPI, 2 billion transactions a month. This may not be very obvious to most people, but there's an e-governance platform, again, using technology to transform the way urban local bodies do their, services. So this is the 10-year digital transformation journey that has been going on in India, right? And so we have a very strong, digital infrastructure that's already been set up, digital rails for any future digital transformation. So what we are doing, Digital Life Care, a data-driven healthcare, is built on top of these pillars, right? The mobile pillar, with the mobile revolution, we're talking about 820 smartphones in India by 2022. We're talking about ubiquitous cloud services, right? It's now become every business that's going about doing, and government institutions are using the cloud to lower the infrastructure costs, to do, to reduce the capabilities needed to actually deploy services, making, as a service so popular. the digital rails, the digital infrastructure like Aadhaar and the newly launched National Digital Health Mission, all of these, as well as the actual health system that I just showed you in terms of the 1 million plus field staff, the health and wellness centers, the drugs, the facilities. These existing pillars are what makes a program like, our technology initiative like Digital Life Care for the NCD program even possible, right? We're not doing this in a vacuum. It's building on these existing transformations, these revolutions that have been happening in the country, and we're building on that to deliver this, this digital transformation of the public health sector in India. So what exactly is Digital Life Care? It's a suite of apps on top of a Digital Life Care platform for population-based management of NCDs. And the objectives are threefold, what you see on the right-hand side. We're trying to achieve continuum of care for the individual. So it's ensuring that the individual gets enrolled, screened, treated, and managed for life through the system, and they don't fall through the cracks, right? That's the utmost, that's the biggest objective. That's what we're trying to do. Second, we're trying to ensure that the care providers, the health workers, the doctors, the government officials who are offering this, the care, are able to do this in a very productive and a high quality manner through technology support. And finally, the people who are running these programs, the decision makers, the policy makers, the government administrators, are able to use data and this technology monitoring systems to run such programs at scale for 1 billion population, right? So this is the threefold objective. What we have in the system, we have a suite of apps for the entire the same pyramid that I showed you of all the healthcare staff. We have technology solutions for each of them. In these colored circles that you see, we have one for the village level ASHA worker. We have an app for the health worker called the ANM at the health center, for the medical officer or the doctor at the primary health center, for the specialists at the taluka and the district hospitals, for the government administrators, and for the health officials. So from 1 to 6, we have a suite of apps on the Life Care platform. And this entire thing forms the digital life care solution for NCDs, right? So obviously we are not doing this alone. This is not a one institution or one team kind of job. This is a Government of India program. We work very closely with the ministry and its ecosystem of partners. NHSRC, which is the technical arm for the ministry. We work with the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, the World Health Organization India, ICMR, NICPR. We worked with the states of Andhra and Telangana very closely in the past to get to this stage. We started this entire thing as a CSR initiative of DEL, started in about 2013, late 2013. So we started first working with the NGO Karuna Trust, and then we slowly worked, ramped it up to the states of Andhra and Telangana at a district level, then at a state level. And then finally in 2017, we started working with Government of India on the Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Center program. Today, we also work with Harvard University. We're doing an optimization study along with St. John's. We're working with the Tata Trust, is our closest partner. We're doing this jointly with Tata Trust, and they are our partners in terms of deploying this fully on the ground. We work with India Stack team that has done tremendous, all the transformational digital transformations they have anchored. The National Institute of Cancer Prevention and Research. So a lot of partners that we've worked with over these years. And again, this is what our partner Tata Trust does. So we develop the technology, we ensure that it is deployed, but the field deployment, ensuring that people are trained. We're talking about, eventually 1 million health workers, right? ASHA workers and doctors and everybody together. So you have to have very robust processes for training, for support, for hand-holding, retraining, and that entire cascade model is something the Tata Trust has developed, and they work on very proactively with states. We are right now live in about 28 states, so Tata Trust works on that across the country. And about 56,000 people have been trained so far, right? So far, we have about 83 million people who've been enrolled in our system across 28 states and union territories for this NCD program. We have about 48,000 active users, including health workers, doctors, administrators, about 3,600 master trainers who then go on to train the actual users, have been trained by Tata Trust and the states at the state and district level. So it's a fairly massive, large scale health technology program that has been running now for more than 3 years. So I now want to, this was all to kind of give you all the context of what we are doing with government in, basically doing a digital transformation of the public healthcare system, right? What I want to do now is, instead of, getting into further details, I want to basically put out 4 questions that are fairly common, when people are, when we're talking to people and talking about something like this, these are fairly common questions that a lay person would have about doing digital transformation of the public healthcare system. So I'd like to go through those 4 questions and, just doing a time check. Yeah. And get a sense, and try to basically, answer those questions in the context of our experience over the last 7 years, right? So the first question, and I'll just leave this here so that you can all think through in your minds too. Can health workers with minimal digital literacy embrace technology? And let me provide a little context, right? The ASHA workers or the village health worker is usually 8th standard pass, sometimes not even that, right? And the trained A&M health workers probably have a +2 education, and then they have 2 years of paramedical training. But the ASHA village worker is, we're talking about like an 8th standard pass, right? So and we're talking about rural areas, right? So one of the questions is, really, are these health workers in the rural areas, are they really going to use technology to deliver their services, right? Is that even possible? Is that feasible, right? And from our experience, frankly, that has been the easiest battle to fight, surprisingly, right? We find that, again, we are riding on the wave of the massive digital, mobile revolution and the technology revolution, internet revolution that has happened across the country. But some of the things that we've learned over the time, over these years, is that it's very important, first of all, to make sure that the design is participative. That is, you don't sit in your Bangalore Dell office and design the whole product and then take it out there and hope that they will use it, right? When we first started doing this 7 years ago, we literally used to go down to Gumballi, where working with Karuna Trust in Chamrajnagar, and we would sit there with the health workers and actually design the screens together. And they would give us fantastic inputs. They would say, for instance, why does it do this? How am I supposed to find this person? How would I know what I've already completed? Lot of fantastic inputs that we would get. And then we would go back, fix it, come back and say, okay, now what do you think? And they say, no, this is not very clear. This seems to mean this to me. So this kind of back and forth participation really helped us, help them voice their concerns on what their needs are. But more importantly, it helped us as technology people to put ourselves in the shoes of the actual users, what their daily life looks like, what their job looks like, and design for them, right? So I think that's like probably the single most important point, right? And second, we've made it minimal data entry. It's, we've got to, most of it is just pictures, icons, clicks, swipes, very little data entry. Local language support, we have this in 11 local languages. There's a robust change management process, because you're not going to just give people a mobile app and say, yeah, go ahead and use it. So a lot of training and support, and this is where Tata Trust comes in, training, retraining. What are the kind of training material? How do we make it accessible to them? Videos, audios, how do you ensure that they can have that available easily, right? So these are some examples of the screens. This particular thing that you see at the bottom right is how they, when they're doing a screening for oral cancer or any oral lesions, they don't have to go and specify the coordinates of where they found the issue. This would show all the dots of each of the points, and they would just click on a dot to say, I see a point here, I see a lesion here, I see a red patch here, I see a white patch here. And that information is captured as that graphic, and that is what the doctor gets to see, right? So making things very visual has been one of the strong points that we've learned. And of course, local languages, you can see this in all these local languages. um, yeah. This is the tiered support model. So the end users can either call the call center, which is a support team that is held by Tata Trust, and they offer support in multiple languages. So they can either call the call center, or they can talk to their immediate government program managers, or they can talk to the Tata Trust field teams, right, if they have an issue. The field teams or the L1 support team will try to answer. They've all been trained. They are, working on this on a daily basis. If they can't answer it, they pass it on to the L2 technical support team that again sits in Delhi. They do the entire, management of this, running this in the government data center. This is all running in the government data center, right? And if they are not able to solve it, or if it is an enhancement that the users really want, it comes up to the Dell team, our team sitting in Bangalore. And then we analyze it, and we go through the entire product backlog, all the requests that are coming in. Our product team, and sits down with the engineering team. We prioritize what the needs are, and then it goes out into the next version of the product. So this is a very comprehensive, tight linkage between the field teams, the support teams, the engineering teams, and government. Okay, so that was, and that's how we're basically making sure that something like this works for the end user, who is the health worker. Right? Second question that we also get asked is, a lot of these kind of programs have been tried in the past, but really will these kind of large scale technology programs work in remote rural India, right? So again, this was probably not possible, certainly not very feasible a decade ago, especially in the health sector and all that stuff, right? Where, a lot of the work has to happen in rural India. But things have changed dramatically today, right? Making things, it's so easy to run cloud-based services. So you're not forcing that the people at the last mile, the primary health center, doesn't need to have a local server set up. They don't need, technical IT administrators to actually bring up those services and run it. It all runs on the cloud. It also helps because then you don't need this heavy infrastructure at every local level. So that, I think, has been one of the big key factors why it works. Second, we've designed all these apps, at least for the last mile, for the health workers, the ASHA, the ANM, to be offline mobile apps. So as you can see in this picture, they can work every day, and today, even though we have a lot of good connectivity, still it's very challenging in the remote rural areas. So they don't need to work, they can do their work unhampered. They can work on their mobile phones, on their Android tablets, without any connectivity. Once every day or every couple of days, they come to the primary health center, where they will then sync all their data to the cloud, and they will bring, that data sits on the cloud, now accessible by the doctors at other facilities, by the health staff at the hospitals. And whatever changes they've made will also come back to the health workers. So this two-way sync, which is a very sophisticated technology system that we've built, ensures that they can work without, uninterrupted, whether there's connectivity or not, right? And we make sure that we have a continuous iterative loop. So as and when things are failing, there's a problem here, we make sure that we're immediately there to address it, right? So the next question is, well, this is all fine, but really, why would care providers want to use this? What is the incentive for them to use this, right? Because it's doctors and health workers are all very busy already. They're all overburdened. Just to give you guys an example, a doctor in a primary health center, which is, uh, doctor in a primary health center, that usually a primary health center caters to about 25,000 to 30,000 people. And under the primary health center, you have these sub health centers, where you have the health workers, and each health worker is responsible for about 5,000 people. That is the population catchment. So today at a primary health center, you have a medical, you'll have a doctor who might have a line of, have to see like 100 sometimes, right? In busy primary health centers, 100 to 150 people in a matter of 3 to 4 hours. So they don't want to sit and deal with technology, right? And they're like, why should we have to do this? We're fine the way we are, right? So in that context, what is the incentive, right? We believe that the main incentive has to be genuine value addition for the users, right? And that goes back to the design. We have to build this context that I've explained to you. That's been the driver. We have to design for that context. The health worker today in most parts of India maintains 40 paper registers, right? And we did a study with IIMB where we actually, it's called a time and motion study, where we actually tracked the health worker, walked behind her, shadowed her for a day to understand what does her day look like, right? And if they're doing their job conscientiously, they might have to spend a couple of hours a day just to maintain all their paperwork across all the health programs, not just NCDs. They have to do, maternal child health, communicable diseases, a lot of these things, right? So maintaining all that paperwork, and then every time they have to search, if they have to find a patient, they have to go search for this through all their registers. They have to report something, their supervisor asks them for a report. They'll have to go quickly calculate all of that stuff and report it. So obviously you can imagine it's pretty painful, and these are all the things that are so easily done with technology, right? Generating reports, searching, maintaining all these records over time. These are all very, very easy. So I think that is the single biggest value addition, right? If we are genuinely solving their problem, that's why it would be useful. We've also built a lot of work plans and reminders. If this health worker is trying to manage for, care for 5,000 people, it would be great if she could get a reminder saying so and so person, Padma from so and so house needs her next follow up for her hypertension, or so and so needs their next follow up for diabetes, right? So these kinds of things will make it very easy for them to track just their plan. What does my calendar look like for the week, right? um, and the most important thing I think is the referral workflow. So normally when people, in one of the big challenges that government faces is because health seeking behavior is low, a person who's enrolled will get screened. But then if the health worker refers them to the next level, right, from the village level to the sub-center level to the primary health center level, they may not actually go there, right? And through technology, we can actually give a report and say, these were all the people who were referred but did not reach the primary health center. These were all the people who were diagnosed but did not go for their treatment, or those who were treated but didn't come back for their follow-up visit, right? That's really powerful, because then instead of just hoping that people are screened, examined, and they will actually show up, you will know specifically who are the ones who need to be followed up because they didn't actually show up for the next visit, right? Or they didn't actually go and for their diagnosis or for their examination. So these are the kinds of things that technology, so this ability to track a person across, these are all at different facilities by different care providers, but it's the same health record. So this makes it very powerful, and it's a genuine value addition for the users. The next thing is all these, comprehensive modules, and these have been designed. So this is the example that I was giving earlier of the, oral screening, where they just have to touch on something and then it turns red. So that's a pretty good indicator of where the problems are for that person. So the doctor can also look at that. So these are some pictures of how they would use this on the ground. We have comprehensive hypertension, diabetes, and cancer modules that we worked with all the experts from NHSRC, AIMS, ICMR institutions, and all of that to, and WHO to design these modules. Also, medication prescription and dispensation, who's been prescribed what, did they come and pick up that medicines? And these are all protocol based. So, these are Government of India protocols. So it would, if a person has a BP above so much, then this is what they need to get referred for. These are all suggestions that come to the doctor, and then the doctor can make their own decision based on their observation of the person in front of them. But it helps standardize the quality of care, because suggestions keep coming to the doctors and the health workers based on Government of India protocols, right? And then dashboards. We're not talking about dashboards just for the decision makers sitting in Delhi, but everybody. So the dashboards that you see on the left hand side are for the village level health workers, so that they get motivated and they can track and say, oh, out of my total population of 3,000, I've only enrolled 92, right? And I need to enroll so many more, or I've only screened so many, or so many people I need to follow up with. And this is a great tool. And, in fact, one of the examples is that, these the health workers, their supervisor is the doctor at the primary health center, will ask them at the end of the day if he wants to see their performance, just take a screenshot of your dashboard and WhatsApp it to me. A lot of the work happens on WhatsApp. A lot of the support, the Tata Trust, we have one WhatsApp group for each state, and everybody, all the participants are there, 100, 200 of them, and everybody is using that platform to kind of, share, to ask questions, why is this working, why is this not working, and stuff like that, right? So these kinds of tools are very, very useful for them to be able to share, and analysis of, of the number of people who have hypertension, who are then referred for a high thing, how many of them have actually seen, what age group, what habits do they have, and stuff like that. So these kind of analysis we can do with these dashboards. So these dashboards that we have for all the users makes it again very useful for them to kind of monitor the program um, on a daily basis. And finally, how do we build, if this is a good thing, yes, users will like it, it can add value, but how do you actually build technology to reach 500 million people, right? Just the scale of this is a big is a big challenge, right? And this has to come from platform thinking. We have to look at this as not just a bunch of apps that we're going to develop, but really the thinking has to be, how much can you push into the platform? How do you ensure that you have a layered platform architecture? So what we have designed this is, right at the bottom you have the infrastructure modules that could be your ID management, security, registries, your personal health record, a consent framework. These are all things that are essential, frankly, to any technology system across any sector, right? If you were trying to do, a banking system, you were trying to do, a COVID system, or, a health system, education, infrastructure is common, right? And this is where Aadhaar and things like that come in. And in the health sector, there is the National Digital Health Mission, which is being built as this infrastructure platform. So what we are building today will sit on top of the National Digital Health Mission. So this kind of separation of the infrastructure, this has, this is common to all health programs, is one of the key principles that we followed. Above that, we built the platform. This is common to all of primary healthcare. Everybody, whether it's communicable diseases, TB, leprosy, maternal child health, immunization, everybody needs to get enrolled. Then you need, a protocol, a rule-based protocol system, a decision support system, a referral workflow for whatever disease. They need to get referred to the higher level. They need to come back for follow-up. People need reminders to make sure they go for their visits. The health workers need a tool to plan their visits. So all of these that are common to government healthcare programs, and not just for one program, these go into the healthcare platform. And finally, on top, you would have the apps, right? Today, we built the NCD apps, but the vision is to make this platform, this kind of platform thinking will make it possible for any app to come and sit on top of this platform, right? So what are some of the key features of the platform? We have to look at, how do you design for diverse needs of states? Tamil Nadu will say, we don't have a ANM, the health worker at the trained health worker at the sub health center level. Our village level health worker does all this work, right? So they need a slightly different workflow. So you have these kinds of changes that are, different for each state. You have to design a system that is configurable, right? And that can be used by each of these states. It has to be interoperable, because otherwise you're going to end up with 20 apps for the health worker. And today there already are so many apps, and the health workers complain, I have to open this app if I'm doing NCD, I have to open this app if I'm doing immunization, and it's a real problem. So how do you kind of, separate out that for the health worker? You put that all in the background and give her a seamless interface so that she has just one interface and all the interoperability happens smoothly. It has to be API based for interoperability. So that's another key feature. Security and privacy. We're talking about government health data, right? I mean, it's a citizen health data. So it has to be, you have to bake that into the design. Everything has to be encrypted. There has to be a multi-factor authentication, making sure that, people are, managing this very carefully, role-based access control, all of that, right? And it has to be performance, optimized for high performance. You can't say, oh, tomorrow, a bunch of other health workers, people, users come in and then suddenly the system isn't working. It has to scale gracefully. It has to be easily maintained. So this kind of, it's not just about the app is the lighter part of it, right? The bulk of the work is how do you think at a platform level? How do you build all of these features so that this can run at scale and it can be sustainable? So that's how you, build it for a nation scale program. So I'm going to, close with this just to recapture as a summary. We talked about, the digital transformation of the public healthcare system. I talked about our digital life care system, which is a suite of 6 apps for from the village level worker to the trained health worker, the doctors at the primary, secondary level, the administrators, and the health officials. A suite of apps that sit on the digital life care platform. We talked about the ecosystem of partners and Tata Trust that does the complete deployment on the ground with their staff and the support models. And then the 4 questions, common questions that people might have about how, is it really feasible to do digital transformation in the public healthcare space? Can health workers with minimal digital literacy embrace technology? And we said yes, through participative design, human-centered design, through a very robust change management, training, support process. Will technology work in remote rural India? Yes, you piggyback on the cloud-based services, on mobile technologies, offline apps. Um, what is the incentive for care providers to use digital health systems? Make sure that you're providing genuine value to them, helping them move away from these 40 registers that a health worker needs to deal with, help them to make their reporting much easier, give them reminders. So genuinely provide value addition for them. And then how do we build scalable technologies to reach hundreds of millions of people? Think platform, platform approach, so keep the platform lower levels extremely minimal, security, scale, ID, and then slowly add the more, specific layers come on top, so that this way it stays open for innovation. New people can come and build apps on top of it, and this makes it very easy for people to to innovate without having to worry about all the complexities is buried underneath, so that they don't have to deal with it, right? These are some of the things. And in terms of the kinds of innovations that we expect to see, the idea is that when you build a platform like this should lead to a lot of innovation going forward, right? You should have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people building apps, right? Like, for instance, like I just explained, doctors don't like dealing with, they have 100 patients standing in front of them. They don't want to be sitting and staring at a computer. So what kind of innovations can we do? Can we do really cool speech to text so that they can keep talking into their computer, into their phone, and they can keep looking. Patients don't like it if the doctor is not looking at them, right? So can we do that? How do we build on the fact that, the health workers really feel pride in using this, technology? So how do you make it easier for them? What kind of innovations can you do to ensure that their adoption can be much better, much faster? So there is scope for, especially with AI, ML, can you start getting personalized training for each of the health workers. Where are they getting stuck? How do you make that better for them? There is a lot that can be done. So the way we would look at this is just the basic digital infrastructure that we need to put in place. And once you have this layered platform and you've done this all properly, then innovation can happen at scale up on top. And that's what I'd like to leave you all with today. And we can open it up. It's exactly 5:30, which is when I was supposed to finish my presentation. So happy to open it up for questions. These are just some photographs from the field. You know, people that, in fact, you'll actually see people from my team here on the field. How do you get health workers to engage? In fact, we keep thinking this is like a digital literacy program, right? One of the things that our Telangana partner was saying was that because people use this on a daily basis, they feel pride in the fact that they've gotten so comfortable using a tablet, right? They're able to, we've had people demo how quickly they can enroll a person, screen a person. So there's a lot of pride. Sometimes we've had older health workers come and say that, even my grandson looks at me with respect because I'm holding this tablet and I walk around, and they're like, wow, my grandmother's using this technology to go and do stuff, right? So it gives them a sense of dignity, a purpose, respect. And so those are all the other additional benefits of a program like this. So
yeah, Sunita, we do have a couple of questions. I've put it up in the chat box.
Okay. Okay. So the first question, would you be able to share any number? So the numbers that that we share, because this is a Government of India program. So unless they put out the numbers, we aren't allowed to share it. But we do talk about, the number of people enrolled in the system. And like I said, that's 83 million so far. I also want to say that enrollment in screening doesn't really mean screening is useful, but truly to actually start seeing a significant impact on people's lives, right? It's going to take much longer because technology is not a silver bullet. It's not going to go and immediately change people's behavior. It's not going to fix all the problems that we have in the country, right? It's an enabler. So to that extent, if it's going to, the program is a very well designed, very powerful program, screening and prevention of NCDs, and technology is an enabler in there. So we hope that over the next few years, we're going to see through deeper adoption of the system, it can start yielding benefits to the care providers and improve the processes. How were we impacted? Yes, we were definitely impacted. We, as in the program, was impacted because of COVID. The NCD screening program slowed down in most states. Most people initially because of lockdown, and after that because the health workers and the doctors were all focusing on COVID. It's slowly picking up now again because also people realize that people with hypertension and diabetes are more vulnerable in the COVID context. So the importance of continuing NCD screening is people are really aware of that in terms of government. So that's been picking up again. Can you share any personal experience that you had that made you feel the cause was worthwhile? I mean, many. I mean, I personally, I think I've had the opportunity to interact with and train maybe 600, 700 ANMs, health workers, and interact with lots of doctors. And it's just been an amazing thing. There are times I know that, there are times when I've gone into a training and some of there's one older health worker who was initially extremely unhappy and, almost angry, saying, why do you all come up with these kinds of technology ideas? First of all, we are so busy, we have so much work to do. Now we have to learn this new thing. And she was really very unhappy. And then I sat with her, a bunch of us, we were all there, we interact very closely with them, sat with her, talked about this and talked about how it's not just this program. Worldwide, there's a big move towards technology. So it's going to happen anyway. And we are here to help you. So if you use this opportunity to learn, and you can actually feel very proud that you've learned something new, and you can engage with the younger people in your family. And after this lot of conversation, and we convinced her, we told her, we are there for you, we will support you, whatever your needs are. And by the end of that whole training, not that day, but over time, she became one of our strong supporters. So those kinds of things make me feel very, in fact, I'm happiest when I'm there on the field interacting with them. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to do that for a while now. Yes, so the NDHM initiative, exactly. So we've been working with them over, since it was launched over the last few months, and specifically we are engaging already on the NDHM Health ID, and so that integration is in process. I'm an engineer wanting to work in the social impact space. What criteria do you use to select your team? Ours is a small team. For me, one of the biggest factors when I'm interviewing anybody in the team is, why do you want to do this, right? So the passion is really, really important, because if you're not really passionate about wanting to bring about social change, you can very easily get frustrated, or just impatient, or unhappy with the pace, or just not being able to deal with the pressure. So I would for me, the most important criteria is your intent. How why do you want to do this? This is not just a job, this has to be thought of as a mission, right? We're trying to bring better healthcare. We're trying to support in the cause of bringing better healthcare to millions of people. So that has to be the primary driver. That has to be the reason why you wake up in the morning and come into work, right? And so that's, I'm very happy to say that I have a fantastic team, and we all work very closely together. Shruti is on this call with me, from our product team. So yeah, so well, I think I've made all my closing remarks about the importance of using technology for these kinds of social programs, and the importance of people who are well intentioned, who I mean people who have the intention of social impact, taking the time and effort to learn more about such programs, and how government works, and how NGOs work, and actually engaging with them, learning about it, and contributing your skills towards these kinds of causes. I think that's really, really important. And I hope that more people, take that step to contribute their technology skills, or whatever skills they have, to bring about social impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunita, for sharing your expertise with us. It was really great to be a part of this masterclass, and I'm sure all our participants feel very much the same. Coming up next, we have a session on Global Bio India Talk, funding schemes from BIRAC for medtech innovators, and a masterclass on global innovation trends in agri-tech and their relevance for small farmers in India. You can also meet Rishabh from Unido and Vaibhav, Bhuvan, and Lavanya from PwC India in the networking lounges. Thank you everyone who joined us for this session today, and see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshita.